Okay, so this is problem 6, the last problem on the review packet for Unit 1 test. So we are trying to find A, B, C, and D from these piecewise functions in order to make sure the graph is continuous. And the definition of continuous says, hey, if you have f of c, f of some c value, you have to get out a point, which means that the function is defined. And then 2, the limit as x approaches that same c value of that function has to exist. You've got to be able to get an answer from that when you do the limit from the left and the right. And then statement 3 says that f of c, the answer we get up here for the y value of the point, has to equal the limit as x approaches c of my function, the answer we get here. These two numbers out here have to be the same. So when I do this problem, the first thing I want to do is factor this to x plus 2 and x minus 1, which these x minus 1's reduce, so this whole thing is equal to x plus 2. So we usually skip to the limit part when you're doing finding variables, so I'm going to do that. So I'm going to take the limit as x approaches 1 from the left, which is this x less than 1, of x plus 2, and when I plug that 1 in, I get 1 plus 2, which is 3. And then when I do the limit as x approaches 1 from the right, that's going to be this one where x is greater than 1. You read it backwards for this function, which is b times x minus c squared, which is going to be b times 1 minus c squared. That's what I get for this function. So this gives me an equation for the limit to exist. These two limits have to be the same. So I say one equation that I'm going to use is b is going to equal 1 minus c squared. I'm not equal, but b times 1 minus c squared has to equal 3. Now because of this last thing down here, that means that the point that I get out for this first step also has to equal these two things, which is 3. So because this says when a is 1, that means that f of 1, which is equal to a, also has to equal 3, this same 3 value I got here. So a equals 3 is that first value that I wanted to find. Now this is one equation with two variables, so I have to come up with another equation. So I'm going to do the 4 values here. So I'm going to come here and do the limit as x approaches 4 from the left, which is this one, x less than 4, that's to the left of 4. So I'm going to use this same function right here, this b times x minus c squared. And when I plug 4 in there, I'm going to get b times 4 minus c squared. And then I'm going to do the limit from the right of 4, which is this one. So I get the limit as x approaches 4 from the right side, which is this, 2x minus 8, and I plug 4 in for that, and I get 2 times 4 minus 8, which is 0. So I get the equation b times 4 minus c squared. This answer to the limit has to equal that 0. Okay? So next, I also am going to use the same thing here, that f of 4, it tells me up here, is d, and this same d has to equal both of these, which means d equals 0, so that gives me my d value right there. So now I got to find b and c from these two equations. So I'm going to solve this one for b, and I'm going to stick it in over here. So I'm going to divide each side by this quantity 1 minus c squared, so b will equal 3 times 1 minus c, the quantity squared. And this b and this b have to be the same, so I can stick this in for that b, which is what I'm going to do. And that whole thing has to equal 0, so I'm going to take this equation here and solve this for c because I got rid of two equations. So I need to take this 1 minus c and multiply it over to the other side, which gives me 3 times 4 minus c, the quantity squared. Then I divide each side by 3, which gives me 4 minus c, the quantity squared, equals 0. Then I'm going to square root each side, which gives me 4 minus c equals 0. So that gives me 4 equals c. So there's my c value. So there's 3 of my 4 values right there. And then I take this 4 and I'm going to put it back in there for that C and solve for B. So B is going to be 3 over 1 minus 4 squared, which means B is going to equal 3 over negative 3 squared, which means B is going to be 3 over 9, which means B equals 1/3. And there's my 4 answers. A equals 3, B equals 1/3, C equals 4, and D equals 0. I hope this helps.